Pam Bondi steps into the courtroom, ready to take on a wealthy tech mogul and his dark secrets. But when Judge Samuel Pierce, known for his arrogance and iron grip, starts attacking her before she can even speak, she realizes this isn't just a trial. It's a dangerous game where the truth is buried, and Pierce might be the one pulling the strings. Can Bondi expose the conspiracy, or will she be crushed by the system she's daring to challenge? Karoline Leavitt strode onto the stage in Jacksonville, her blonde hair pulled back tightly, her voice unwavering. No script, no teleprompter, just a pile of classified documents stacked in front of her. She locked eyes with the cameras, her tone cutting through the air. This isn't about politics. This is about integrity, and Judge Boasberg has betrayed it. Those words set off a chain reaction. The statement ricocheted across newsrooms, courtrooms, and government offices. A federal judge facing allegations of corruption, it felt like fiction, not breaking news. Yet Levitt's resolve never wavered. Just 72 hours earlier, whispers had begun circulating within the Justice Department. A classified file, an internal probe, a sensitive case review tied to Judge James Boasberg, a seasoned federal judge better known for his deep political connections than his rulings. Until now, his name was unknown to most Americans, but Levitt had been watching him for months. A recent Sunday ruling in a Miami courtroom, Judge Boasberg issued a last-minute restraining order halting the deportation of 7 individuals with suspected ties to Trinora Agua, a gang so ruthless that even ICE agents hesitated to confront them. To Levitt, this wasn't just poor judgment, it was judicial sabotage. What set off alarm bells was his method. No written directive, just a verbal order, vague, undocumented. Homeland Security, assuming a lack of formal paperwork meant they could proceed, continued with the deportations. Within hours, the fallout was visible. Reporters swarmed ICE offices. Protesters rallied outside federal buildings. Behind closed doors, something deeper cracked. That night, Levitt had a call with DHS leadership and White House counsel. Her message was clear. He's not interpreting the law, he's hiding behind it. That conversation ignited a firestorm, but Levitt had already been preparing for battle. Her team had quietly built a case. Interviews with former clerks, leaked internal memos, even encrypted messages flagged in a parallel investigation. She wasn't just outraged, she was ready for war. During her press conference, she withheld the full list of accusations, but one thing was unmistakable. Obstruction of justice and abuse of power were on the table. A disturbing pattern had emerged in Boasberg's decisions, each one strategically bending legal standards, especially in high-stakes national security cases. Viewers were left stunned. Was the real scandal Leavitt's allegations, or the fact that no one had dared to speak up before? News anchors scrambled to adjust headlines, legal analysts rushed to break down the implications. Across the country, young attorneys whispered the same question: is this really happening? Levitt had always been a formidable figure, but this was unprecedented. She wasn't just calling out a judge, she was dismantling his legacy, piece by piece, case by case. The country was split. Critics accused her of pursuing a political vendetta. Supporters called her a hero, finally holding the judiciary accountable. But one thing was undeniable. This wasn't a publicity stunt. She meant business. The battle had begun, and the fallout was just getting started. What led to this moment? Why Boasberg? Why now? Scandals like this don't appear out of nowhere. Long before the headlines, before the accusations, James E. Boasberg was seen as untouchable. A Princeton graduate, a Harvard Law alum, a man whose connections stretched from Capitol Hill to the highest legal offices. To challenge him wasn't just difficult, it was unheard of. His rise was methodical. Miami courtrooms, Florida circuit, a federal judgeship under President Obama. In 2020, he took the helm of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, overseeing some of the country's most sensitive national security cases. But over time, his rulings raised eyebrows. Not because of one misstep, but because of a pattern. When the FBI faced backlash for surveillance misconduct, Boasberg's response was measured. Some called it cautious, others complicit. A reprimand here, a slap on the wrist there, no real accountability, no deterrent. Karoline Leavitt noticed, and she waited. Case after case, Boasberg's decisions reshaped the legal landscape, especially in cases involving immigration and executive authority. But then came the restraining order on deportations. To Levitt, it wasn't just ambiguous, it was intentional. She wasn't alone in that suspicion. Inside DHS, officials were blindsided. One leaked email captured their frustration. Are we seriously grounding flights based on a passing remark from a judge? The battle lines had been drawn, and for Boasberg, the clock was ticking. The final decision was made. The flights continued as planned. That's when Judge Rosenfeld issued a warning of contempt, accusing the defense of willful obstruction rather than mere oversight. His frustration was evident. In response, White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt authorized an extensive review of Rosenfeld's judicial history. Not just his rulings, but also case management records, clerk correspondences, and patterns in scheduling that hinted at potential ethical concerns. As her team delved deeper, anomalies emerged. An unusually high number of undisclosed interactions involving cases tied to encrypted communication technologies, particularly one platform, Cipherlink. What had initially seemed like a legal footnote was evolving into a critical issue. In early 2024, a relatively obscure lawsuit surfaced, growing into a major controversy. It alleged that key figures from the previous administration had relied on Cipherlink to orchestrate classified decisions outside the official record. When the case unexpectedly landed on Rosenfeld's docket, alarm bells rang, not because of outright bias, but due to his close personal ties with individuals flagged in the evidence review. Yet, despite this, he did not recuse himself. Instead, he took full control, moving key hearings behind closed doors, sealing witness lists, and restricting media access. Leavitt wasn't just concerned, she was convinced something was being concealed. She suspected Rosenfeld had suppressed key evidence or deliberately stalled proceedings to ensure leads went cold. The Department of Justice escalated its efforts, issuing subpoenas for call logs, emails, and internal memos. A troubling pattern emerged: delayed court dates, missing documents, and inexplicable alterations to access records. Leavitt formed a theory. Rosenfeld was protecting high-level operatives who needed those Cipherlink messages to disappear permanently. By the time deportation orders were issued in a connected case, she had already decided on her next move. The only question was timing. But this wasn't just about legal strategy. Something personal had shifted behind the scenes. The Justice Department's Miami headquarters housed the meeting. A modest room, navy blue carpet, the lingering scent of printer toner and stale coffee. Leavitt sat at the table, arms crossed, expression sharp. A white noise generator hummed outside, a safeguard against eavesdropping, but the weight of the moment made secrecy feel futile. "We can't ignore this anymore," she said, locking eyes with Deputy Counsel Marcus Bennett. On the table sat a folder, not thick, but significant. It contained intercepted Cipherlink conversations, secured through a discreet third-party subpoena. A cooperating source, neither a whistleblower nor a media informant, had sent it straight to Leavitt's office. She flipped it open, scanning the contents. One message stood out, dated 2 months before Rosenfeld took on the Cyphergate case. It read, "They'll release portions by April, but don't worry, Jay. I've secured our side." Her hands trembled slightly. Bennett attempted to downplay it, perhaps a misinterpretation, an out-of-context remark, but Leavitt shook her head. "It's not just this," she said. "It's the pattern. The redacted files, the undocumented directives, the closed-door proceedings. It's all too deliberate." Then she uttered the words that would shift everything. "I won't let this disappear into some Inspector General's report 3 years from now." That statement altered the trajectory of their investigation. The following 72 hours were a whirlwind of legal filings, media strategy sessions, and high-level briefings with the Office of Legal Counsel. This wasn't about a leak, it was about impact. But one critical conversation remained private. 2 days before Levitt went public, she sought the counsel of a veteran federal judge in Arizona, a longtime mentor who had observed Rosenfeld's maneuvers from afar. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Karoline?" the judge asked. "I am. You'll burn bridges that won't be rebuilt." Levitt's reply was calm but unwavering. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to preserve justice." She knew the consequences, politically, professionally, even personally, but she also knew what was at stake. Earlier that year, a grieving father from Key West had written her. His daughter, a federal agent, had been critically injured. in an operation compromised by a judicial hold on suspect detentions, a hold issued by Rosenfeld. The letter had been simple yet devastating. Judicial decisions have real consequences. My daughter will never walk again because a judge protected the wrong people. Levitt never forgot those words. She kept the letter in her desk, rereading it whenever doubts crept in. When critics later accused her of making this personal, they weren't entirely wrong. It was personal, but not out of vengeance, out of duty. Once she publicly named Judge Jason Rosenfeld and confirmed an active investigation, there was no turning back. Her reputation, career, and credibility were now entwined with the case's outcome. But as the story spread, an even darker layer unraveled. Because Ciphergate wasn't just about encrypted messages, it was about the people who had used them, the secrets they buried, and the lengths taken to keep them hidden. The public latched onto Ciphergate. The term flooded news cycles, social media, podcasts, and television debates. It wasn't just about technology anymore, it was about power, corruption, and deception. The reality was that Cipherlink had long been a favored tool in Washington. Officials claimed it prevented leaks, but its automatic deletion feature created an even greater issue. Because in government, records weren't just procedural formalities, they were accountability itself. The original lawsuit had been filed by a small watchdog group in Tampa, dismissed at first as inconsequential, but when internal memos surfaced showing erased calendar entries, scheduling contradictions, and entire chains of communication missing from the official record, public scrutiny intensified. Then the names emerged, not low-level aides, but major figures, former national security officials, deputy defense secretaries, and even a former consultant who had advised Rosenfeld during surveillance policy reviews. Yet, despite all of this, Rosenfeld retained control of the case. He never disclosed these associations, never recused himself. Instead, he scheduled a pre-trial session, closed it to the public, and issued a vague statement about procedural assessments. That was the breaking point. Levitt's team took the unprecedented step of subpoenaing Cipherlink's encrypted logs, a legally complex maneuver justified under national security statutes. The results weren't complete, but they were damning. One exchange stood out, a message from a legal aide involved in the case to a former DOJ official who had worked under Rosenfeld. JR says we'll bury it in pretrial, no concerns. No files go public unless forced. 3 days later, Rosenfeld postponed discovery. In theory, judicial delays were routine, but in context, it looked like a calculated blockade. Levitt no longer saw an impartial judge. She saw a gatekeeper shielding key players from exposure. And she realized that every moment he remained on the bench, the trail grew colder. Late that night, she made her final decision. There was no backing down now. As she convened with her legal strategy team, the urgency was clear. If we delay, the window closes, she stated firmly. This case gets sealed permanently and the public remains in the dark. One advisor, hesitant, asked, "Do you really think he orchestrated a cover-up?" She met his gaze. "I believe he knew exactly who would be implicated, and I believe he made his choice." The phrase "he made his choice" would soon echo in headlines from the Miami Herald, Politico, and even CNN. It became more than a remark. It became a rallying cry to those who followed the unfolding controversy. Her campaign wasn't an act of political vengeance. It was a fight to reclaim control of a justice system manipulated from behind closed doors. The deeper she dug, the more unsettling it became. How had a judge with decades of service so effortlessly delayed, redirected, and concealed judicial actions linked to a scandal with national security implications? Each step forward was met with resistance. A legal advocacy group filed a formal complaint, labeling her actions an attack on judicial independence. If you believe in accountability, hit that subscribe button now. A former Harvard law professor took to the airwaves, accusing her of politicizing the judiciary. But the public watched, and one question lingered. If Boasberg had nothing to hide, why wasn't he cooperating? The answer wasn't just about him. The more she investigated, the more names surfaced. By the time she formally filed charges, the legal world was already rattled. She stood before the press, this time flanked by 2 senior DOJ investigators. No cameras were allowed inside the confidential briefings, but reporters clung to the edges, capturing every word through cracked doors. Her voice remained steady, no theatrics, no embellishments. "We believe Judge James Boasberg has knowingly obstructed federal investigations, misused his authority to shield specific individuals from scrutiny, and compromised the integrity of our justice system. The Department of Justice is moving forward with formal charges. The accusations were precise: obstruction of justice, abuse of judicial authority, deliberate concealment of evidence, and failure to recuse himself in cases riddled with conflicts of interest." The legal community erupted. Law firms scrambled to issue statements, judges convened in private to discuss the ramifications, and within federal agencies, mentions of Boasberg were quietly scrubbed from communication channels. But what truly set this apart was what came next. Leavitt's office released a series of internal messages, carefully vetted for public disclosure. None were classified, but all were damning. Some suggested hearings had been rescheduled to benefit particular legal teams. One text simply read, "Keep this in my courtroom. Too risky elsewhere." Another email hinted at coordinating case timelines with anticipated political shifts. Individually, the messages weren't a smoking gun. Collectively, they painted a picture of corruption, cloaked in legal robes. Meanwhile, Boasberg remained silent. No press statement, no court appearance, no formal denial. His clerk issued a brief response: "Judge Boasberg has always served honorably and will respond through the appropriate legal channels." It only fueled the storm. People demanded answers. They wanted him in front of cameras, explaining himself, proving his innocence. Instead, allies rushed to defend him. Major network commentators accused Levitt of launching a politically motivated crusade, sending a warning to judges who ruled against conservative interests. But for every critic, more supporters emerged. Veterans, small business owners, immigration officers, even former clerks from Boasberg's own court started to speak out. Some defended him, others in hushed tones told stories. Some vague, others disturbingly detailed. A court interpreter recalled vital documents vanishing in an immigration case reassigned to Boasberg. A paralegal in Georgia remembered instructions to delay filing so a sympathetic judge could claim jurisdiction. These weren't bombshell revelations. They were whispers. But together they formed a pattern. Before stepping away from the public eye, Levitt granted one last interview. When asked whether she feared political fallout, she answered simply, "Let consequences come. I'd rather lose position than principle." The statement resonated, spreading across social media, printed on merchandise, even appearing in campaign materials. Critics mocked it, but the message endured. Inside the courthouse, pre-trial preparations were underway. It would be a long process. Judges rarely faced criminal charges, but this time the public was watching. The day finally came. In a quiet Tampa courtroom, Judge Boasberg arrived, flanked by attorneys, his expression betraying the turmoil beneath his polished exterior. Charges were read, motions filed. He pleaded not guilty. Outside, crowds gathered. Some held signs demanding justice. Others waved American flags in support of Leavitt. Division ran deep, but one question loomed. Could the system be trusted? The judiciary had long been perceived as untouchable, different from politicians, neutral, unassailable. But now, that illusion was fracturing. The Levitt stayed out of the spotlight in the days following the arraignment. No press conferences, no statements, just quiet, steady progress. One morning, her assistant delivered an unmarked envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from a retired federal clerk in Naples. "I watched Boasberg override a colleague in 2018 on an immigration case. The individual was released. 6 weeks later, he killed a patrol officer in Tennessee. Everyone knew, no one spoke. Levitt never released the letter. She didn't have to. The stories kept coming, patterns emerging, not always provable but consistent. Boasberg's legal team called the case an egregious overreach, insisted on his innocence, and accused Levitt of a political vendetta. But they couldn't explain the missing court logs, the rescheduled hearings, the erased messages. Some argued her actions set a dangerous precedent, making judges vulnerable to political attacks. Others countered, accountability wasn't a threat to justice, it was its foundation. Then came the verdict. No cinematic drama, no climactic music, just a gavel's echo in a hushed courtroom. Not all charges stuck. Some were dismissed due to lack of hard evidence, key documents erased before DOJ intervention. But 2 charges remained: deliberate concealment of evidence and misuse of judicial authority. His sentence: removal from the bench, permanent disbarment, a federal review of his past ruling. No prison time, but no redemption either. Leavitt didn't celebrate, no victory lap. She simply returned to her office, gazing out at the Atlantic. "That's one," she murmured, because this was never about one man. It was about a system people were finally seeing for what it was: flawed, human, and in desperate need of accountability. In a rare public appearance, Leavitt addressed a class of first-year law students. "Don't chase recognition," she told them. "Chase integrity, because if you don't, someone else will define your legacy." The room fell silent. Some recorded, others just listened. In the months that followed, public interest in judicial oversight surged. Quiet reforms took shape. New oversight policies didn't make headlines, but they mattered, because true integrity isn't about punishment, it's about vigilance. And in the end, the real victory wasn't in Boasberg's downfall, it was in what came next. From Karoline Leavitt's relentless fight, a profound lesson emerges. Integrity isn't just a virtue, it's a weapon against corruption's quiet creep. Her battle reveals that systems, no matter how revered, are only as just as the people upholding them. When power shields the guilty, silence becomes complicity, and courage, though costly, is the only path to change. In our own lives, this rings true, whether it's calling out a wrong at work or standing firm against unfairness. We shape the world by what we refuse to ignore. Leavitt's story isn't just hers, it's a mirror for us all. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Your support keeps these tales alive. What's your takeaway? Drop a comment below, hit that subscribe button, and let's keep pushing for truth together. Your voice matters. Will you use it?